Hey, welcome to our channel. Make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss our latest content.
I always believed I knew Dahlia. I really knew her. Not just in the way you know a person's favorite color or how they take their coffee. I knew the architecture of her silences. I knew the subtle shift in her breathing that meant she was about to fall asleep. I knew the precise curve of her smile when she was genuinely happy versus the one she used for polite company. 5 years. 5 years we had spent building a life, brick by brick. A life of shared jokes, inside jokes that made no sense to anyone else. A life of facing challenges together, from a leaky roof to a career setback. A life filled with plans, a future I could see so clearly it felt like a memory I was just waiting to step into. I remembered the day I proposed on that cliffside overlooking the ocean. The wind was whipping her hair across her face, and she was laughing, and in that moment, the entire world seemed to shrink down to the sparkle in her eyes when she whispered, "Yes." That sparkle was my North Star, my true north. Everything felt secure, solid, until tonight. We were sitting at the kitchen table. The distant, muffled sound of a sitcom played from the living room, filling the comfortable silence between us. It was a normal Tuesday. Utterly, completely normal. I was finishing my plate. She was buttering a second piece of bread. The light above us cast a warm, familiar glow on the dark wood of the table. And then she spoke. Her voice was calm, unbelievably calm. The same tone she'd used to talk about the weather or a new restaurant she wanted to try. "On Saturday," she said, not looking up from her bread, "I'm going out to dinner with a coworker." My fork stopped. The world didn't freeze in a dramatic, cinematic way. No, it was much quieter than that. The sitcom laughter from the other room suddenly sounded harsh, intrusive. The hum of the refrigerator felt like a roar in my ears. I just sat there, waiting for the rest of the sentence. The part where she'd say, "You know, from the marketing team, about that new project," or, "It's a group thing, we're all going out." But the rest of the sentence never came. She just took a delicate bite of her bread, chewed thoughtfully, as if she had just said the most unremarkable thing in the world. My mind raced, trying to catch up. Maybe I misheard. Maybe it was a joke. A terrible, poorly timed joke. I looked for a hint of a smile, a flicker of humor in her eyes. Nothing. She kept her gaze fixed on her plate, deliberately avoiding mine. And that's when a strange feeling began to creep up my spine, a cold, unsettling dread. "What?" My voice came out quieter than I intended, calmer than anyone would expect. She finally looked up, and for the first time in 5 years, I saw something in her eyes I didn't recognize. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was calculated. It was the look of someone who had rehearsed a line and was waiting, with clinical curiosity, to see its effect. "It's just dinner, Elias," she said. Her tone was disturbingly light, airy. "It doesn't change anything between us. I love you. None of this will affect our marriage." I stared at her. I stared, trying to find a crack in that serene facade. Trying to find the Dahlia I knew, the woman whose hand I held when she was scared of turbulence on a plane. The woman who cried during sad movies. Where was she? Who was this stranger sitting across from me, dissecting our marriage with the casual indifference of a surgeon? My appetite vanished. My half-eaten dinner suddenly seemed nauseating. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs, a wild, panicked rhythm, but I wouldn't let her see it. I wouldn't give her that power. This was a test, a game. I didn't know the rules, and I didn't know the prize, but I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that she expected me to fall apart. She wanted an explosion. She wanted me to yell, to demand answers, to throw down an ultimatum. She wanted a reaction, a big one. But if there was one thing I was good at, it was control. I took a slow, deep breath. I could feel the oxygen fill my lungs, steadying the tremor I felt deep inside. I exhaled, just as slowly. If this was a game, I had no intention of losing. A small smile touched the corner of my mouth. Not a real smile, a ghost of one. Indifferent. "I understand," I said, my voice almost disinterested. I picked up my glass of water and took a slow, deliberate sip. I watched her over the rim. Her breathing hitched. Just for a fraction of a second. It was barely noticeable, but I saw it. And it was enough. It confirmed everything. She didn't want my permission. She wanted my pain. The silence stretched on. Seconds felt like minutes. She tried to hide her confusion by looking back down at her plate, but I just kept watching her. my gaze patient, deliberate. Well, I continued, making my tone intentionally casual. Maybe I should go out with someone, too, just to see how it feels. That's when she finally looked at me. Really looked at me. Not with that rehearsed calmness, not with that calculated curiosity, but with something new, uncertainty. I felt a strange, cold satisfaction as I saw the small tremble in her hand, the one holding her fork. She blinked a few times, as if her brain was struggling to process the words. This wasn't in her script. This was an ad-lib she hadn't prepared for. You met someone?" she asked. She tried to sound indifferent, but her voice was a little too tight. I just shrugged, keeping that faint, maddening smile on my face. "There's a woman at the gym I talk to a lot. I think it would be interesting if we went out one of these days." I watched the color drain from her face. It was subtle, but it was there. The rosy flush from the warm kitchen was gone, replaced by a pale, waxy sheen. The cards had just been flipped, and I hadn't even started playing my hand yet. The silence that followed was deafening. It was a physical thing, pressing in on us. Dahlia's confident expression had shattered, just for an instant, but I saw it. The fork she held hovered motionless above her plate. Her eyes, once so full of detached certainty, were now slightly widened, her mind scrambling to catch up to this unexpected turn. I leaned back in my chair, the picture of casual relaxation, as if this entire conversation was nothing more than a mild curiosity. But inside, a calculated pleasure was blooming, the pleasure of seeing her experience the same gut-wrenching insecurity she had just tried to inflict on me. "Oh," she murmured, trying to regain her composure. "I see." She looked away, fidgeting with the napkin on her lap. I noticed the subtle bounce of her leg under the table, a nervous tremor she was trying to hide. I knew her too well. I knew that was her tell. So why was she suddenly so anxious? If she truly believed it was normal, healthy even, for one of us to go out with someone else, why was she so clearly shaken when the shoe was on the other foot? The answer was simple. She wasn't testing the boundaries of our marriage. She was testing me. And now, her little experiment had just escaped the lab. "Is there a problem with that?" I asked, keeping my tone light, almost playful. She forced a small, hollow laugh. "Of course not. I just didn't expect that from you." "Interesting," I replied, crossing my arms. "Because I didn't expect that from you, either." This time, she didn't laugh. My words landed like stones in a still pond, and the ripples disrupted the fragile surface of lightness she had tried to maintain. She quickly tried to recover, lifting her chin. "So, who is she? This woman from the gym?" I smiled to myself. I knew that question was coming. The best part was, she didn't even try to hide her sudden, desperate interest. "I don't know if the details matter that much," I said, picking up my own napkin and dabbing the corners of my mouth. I was done with my meal. "Since, like you said, this doesn't change anything between us, I don't see any reason to get into specifics." She let out a short, sharp breath, almost a scoff. But the tension in her jaw was visible. "So, is it serious? Are you really going to go out with her?" I tilted my head, studying her. "You were the one who said this was something we should explore, weren't you?" Her mouth opened to reply, but nothing came out. For the first time all night, Dahlia was speechless. The confident woman who had started this dangerous game had vanished, replaced by someone who looked lost and afraid. I didn't need anything else. I had what I wanted, the certainty that she had never, not for a single second, imagined I would accept the rules of her game. And more importantly, the certainty that deep down, she was terrified of losing something she never thought could slip through her fingers. Without another word, I picked up my glass, drained the last of the water, and stood up from the table. "Good night, Dahlia." She remained seated, her eyes following me as I left the kitchen. Her face was a mask of confusion and dawning horror, and in that moment, I knew the cards hadn't just been flipped. I was in complete control of the game. In the days that followed, the architecture of our life began to crumble. The house, once filled with the easy rhythm of our routines and casual conversations, was now dominated by a silence that was louder than any argument. I went about my days as usual. On the surface, nothing had changed. I left for work at the same time. I came home at the same time. But something inside me had shifted. A weight had been lifted. The weight of complacency. The weight of taking our peace for granted. Now, I felt lighter, sharper. Dahlia, on the other hand, was drowning. At first, she tried to convince herself it was just a phase, that I was putting on an act to make her back down. But I didn't back down. On the contrary, I leaned in. The first time she felt genuine, undeniable panic was on a Wednesday morning. I was standing in front of the hallway mirror, adjusting the collar of my shirt. It was something I did every day, but this time was different. I took my time. I looked myself over more carefully. I ran a hand through my hair, checking it from different angles. Then, I pulled out my phone. A message had come in. I read it, and I let a small, genuine smile spread across my face. I didn't fake it. I thought of a funny video a friend had sent me, but she didn't know that. I felt her eyes on me from the kitchen doorway. I didn't look at her, but I could feel her stare. I could feel her heart racing from across the house. For the first time, she was feeling something towards me that she had never felt before. Fear, the fear of loss. She tried to hide it. That night, as we sat on the couch, the TV playing another show neither of us was watching, she remarked casually, "You seem more cheerful lately." I didn't even take my eyes off the screen. I just gave a small shrug. "I guess." She shifted, crossing her legs. And busier. This time, I looked at her. My gaze was analytical, calm. I was weighing the intention behind her words. She wasn't making conversation. She was probing, fishing. "I suppose I'm just using my time better," I answered carefully. That sentence, so simple, so bland, sent a visible chill through her. I watched her wrap her arms around herself, as if suddenly cold. The next few days, her observation became an obsession. She watched me constantly. She noticed every time my phone buzzed with a message. She noticed when I left early for a run. One afternoon, I came home from work and went straight to the shower, whistling a melody she didn't recognize. Each little detail was another piece of evidence in the case her anxious mind was building against her. Then came Saturday, the day of reckoning. I was sitting at the kitchen island with my morning coffee. She was moving around the kitchen, her movements jerky and tense. I took a sip of coffee. Then, as casually as she had a few days prior, I dropped the bomb. "I'm going out tonight." Her coffee cup froze halfway to her mouth. I watched her knuckles turn white as she gripped the handle. "Oh?" She tried to sound indifferent. With that woman from the gym?" Her voice cracked on the word woman. The sound was immensely satisfying. I nodded slowly, taking another sip of coffee before answering. "Yeah." I watched her swallow. Hard. Her mind was spinning. I could see it in her eyes. She was searching for a way to regain control, to redirect the conversation, to undo what she had started. But there was no way back. I had accepted the rules of the game she created. And now, for the first time, Dahlia wasn't sure if she was ready to play. That night, she stayed home alone. I left without rushing. I chose a shirt she hadn't seen in a while, one that I knew fit me well. I used a cologne she once said she liked, a long time ago. Its scent lingered in the hallway air like a ghost. I offered no details about where I was going. I didn't ask about her supposed date. And most importantly, I didn't seem the least bit worried about it. As I was walking out the door, I turned back. She was standing in the living room, looking small and lost. "Have a good time tonight," I said, my voice even, and then I left. The truth was, there was no woman from the gym. Not really. I went to a quiet, dimly lit bar downtown, a place I'd never been before. I took a seat at the end of the bar, ordered a bourbon, and just sat there. I didn't look at my phone. I didn't try to talk to anyone. I just watched the people around me. Couples laughing, friends catching up, a man sitting alone, just like me, nursing a drink. And I thought about the last 5 years. I thought about the woman I married. Had I been blind? Had I missed the signs? This test of hers, it didn't come from nowhere. It came from a place of dissatisfaction, of boredom, or maybe, a place of cruelty I never knew she possessed. She hadn't just disrespected me, she had disrespected us. Everything we had built. She had taken our life, our love, our future, and she had placed it on a roulette table, just to see where the ball would land, all for a thrill, all to get a reaction. Well, she got one. Just not the one she wanted. As I sat there, the ice clinking in my glass, a profound and painful clarity washed over me. This wasn't a game anymore. This wasn't about teaching her a lesson. This was about realizing I deserved more. Meanwhile, I knew what she was doing. I could picture it perfectly. Pacing the house. Checking her phone every 30 seconds. Her mind, once so confident and in control, was now a prison of her own making. consumed by thoughts of me. She wasn't on a date with her coworker. I knew that for a fact. The entire story was a fabrication, a flimsy premise for her psychological experiment. The coworker probably existed, but the date was a lie. She was waiting for me to come back early, waiting for me to send a text message saying it was all a joke, waiting for me to show some sign of remorse. I didn't come back early. I didn't send a message. I didn't feel an ounce of remorse. I finished my second bourbon, paid my tab, and left. But I didn't go home. I drove. I drove out of the city, onto the dark, empty highways, with the windows down and the radio playing softly. I drove for hours, with no destination in mind. It was just me, the road, and the stark, painful realization that my marriage was over. Dahlia had killed it. I was just signing the death certificate. When I finally walked through the front door, it was past 3 in the morning. The house was dark, except for the faint, flickering blue light of the TV coming from the living room. She was there, curled up on the couch, wrapped in a blanket. She hadn't expected me to find her awake, but she was. As I stepped into the room, she sat up straight. Her eyes were wide and bloodshot. She looked exhausted, broken. Something inside me should have felt pity, but all I felt was a cold, quiet finality. How was it? Her voice was a whisper. Weak, fragile, the voice of someone who already knew the answer but had to ask anyway. I took off my coat, hung it on the back of a chair. I looked at her, my expression unreadable. Neutral. It was good. 3 simple words. They cut through her like a blade of ice. I saw the last bit of hope drain from her face. I saw panic begin to rise in her throat. She wanted to scream, to ask questions, to demand details, to beg me to say it was all a lie. But she couldn't say a word. The silence was her answer. The lack of remorse on my face was her confirmation. I crossed the room and disappeared down the hallway toward our bedroom, as if the conversation was already over. She remained where she was, frozen on the couch, her heart pounding so hard I could almost feel its frantic rhythm echoing in the silent house. She had wanted to play a game with me, to test my limits, to see if I would feel insecure. But now, as she sat there alone in the dark, I knew she was silently begging for it all to have been just a game. Only this time, I wasn't playing anymore. The next morning, I was the first one up. I made coffee, the familiar ritual feeling alien and hollow. I sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through the news on my phone, just like any other day. But it wasn't any other day. It was the first day of the end. She appeared in the doorway a few minutes later. Her body was heavy with the weight of the previous night. She looked like a stranger in our own home. Seeing me there, so calm, so distant, seemed to twist something inside her. I didn't look up when she entered. I just kept scrolling, sipping my coffee. "You came home late," she said. It wasn't an accusation. It was a statement of fact, laced with a vulnerability she couldn't hide. I showed no reaction. "Yeah," I replied, my eyes still on my phone. That indifference seemed to unnerve her more than any anger could have. She pulled out a chair and sat across from me, her hands clasped tightly on the table. She was searching my face for any trace of hesitation, any sign that this was still an elaborate performance. But I wasn't pretending. I was genuinely, irrevocably distant. And that terrified her. "Elias." Her voice trembled. She hated that sound. I knew she did. She hated showing weakness. "What are we doing?" I finally looked up from my phone. I held her gaze for a long moment, as if deciding whether the question was even worth answering. Then, with a calmness that made my own skin crawl, I said, "You tell me. After all, it was your idea, wasn't it?" I saw her stomach drop. The words hit her with the force of a physical blow. I never thought you would take this so seriously." A laugh escaped my lips. It wasn't a laugh of amusement. It was a dry, bitter sound. The sound of someone who has finally seen the truth with painful clarity. "And what did you expect, Dahlia? That I would beg you not to go? That I would fall to my knees and plead with you to change your mind?" She opened her mouth, but I didn't wait for her answer. "I've spent the last few days thinking about this," I continued, my voice level and cold. "Thinking about what it means for you to suggest something like that. About what it says about us. About what it says about you." Her chest tightened. "Elias, I was wrong." He didn't blink. "Were you?" The silence dragged on, heavy and painful. She wanted to scream that, yes, it was all a mistake, a stupid, crazy idea, but it was too late. The damage was done. The truth had been revealed. I had already made my decision. I stood up, took my mug to the sink, and washed it calmly. It was a simple, domestic act, performed with the chilling precision of a man who was merely finishing his morning routine before moving on. Then, I turned to face her one last time. My eyes were like ice. "Thank you," I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. "Thank you for showing me who you really are." And with that, I left the kitchen without hesitation. I walked into our bedroom. The room we had painted together. The bed where we had slept for 5 years. It no longer felt like mine. On the dresser, where I usually left my keys, I placed a stack of papers I had printed at my office the day before. The divorce petition, already signed by me. When she finally gathered the courage to enter the bedroom a few minutes later, she saw them. She saw the papers, and then she saw me pulling a suitcase from the top of the closet. Her world collapsed. All at once, the sound of the zipper opening echoed in the heavy silence of the room. It was the sound of an ending. She knew it was over. Driven by a final, desperate surge of panic, she took a step forward. She tried to grasp for the control she had so carelessly thrown away. "Elias, please." Her voice trembled, but she forced a smile that looked more like a pained grimace. "This has gone too far. I forgive you for going out with that woman. Let's forget all of this. If you forget what I said, I'll forget what you did. We can start over." I stopped for a second, my hand resting on the open suitcase. I looked at her, and in her eyes, I saw the truth. It wasn't the fear of losing me out of love. It was the fear of losing control. A brief, humorless laugh escaped my lips. "I don't need your forgiveness, Dahlia," I said, my voice firm and clear. "You taught me something valuable these past few days. And now I know I deserve more than this." I zipped the suitcase closed. The sound was final, definitive. I grabbed my keys from the dresser, right next to the papers, and I walked out of the room, out of the house, and out of her life without looking back. The sound of the front door closing behind me was the last thing she heard before the silence became unbearable.